legalizefreedom.com. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? From the nature of reality to the future of humanity. Listen without limits. Unchain your brain. Change your thinking. Change your life. legalizefreedom.com.
Greetings and welcome once again to legalizefreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat and my guest today is Peter Russell. Beginning in August 2020, Freedom from Fear is a free-form discussion series taking the title as its starting point. As with some previous episodes in this series, Peter and I begin by discussing the evolutionary origins and purpose of fear. Fear rarely serves any purpose beyond fleeting moments of real danger, and constantly living in fear is incredibly debilitating. We contrast the evolutionary role of fear with the 21st century explosion in anxiety, neuroses, and declining mental health, and explore how human intelligence is both our greatest gift and the source of our most profound problems. We also consider how thoughts about the past and fear of the future stops us living in the present. Apparently unlike other creatures, human beings know that we are going to die, and fear of death, still perhaps the last great taboo, keeps us from being truly alive. And of course, no contemporary discussion about fear would be complete without examining the pandemic of fear triggered by the current coronavirus crisis.
Hello and welcome, Peter, and thank you so much for joining us once again on legalizefreedom.com.
Lovely to be with you again. Looking forward to it.
So I say joining us again is April 2013 when we last spoke. And, so much has happened since then, to say the least. Before we get started, for listeners who don't know, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, say a little bit about your background and your work in general.
Okay, try to keep it brief. I started off as a mathematician, scientist, theoretical physics, that sort of thing, but got more and more interested in consciousness because I realized that science was never going to answer the question of why are we conscious, and that took me into meditation, into philosophy, particularly Eastern philosophy, and really I suppose my journey has been about looking for what is the essence of the world's spiritual traditions. As a kid I thought that religion was just a load of weird mumbo jumbo, and then I began to realize no, there was something there was some common element to it all, and so I've been fascinated by what is that common element and how to sort of distill that and present it in everyday terms. And that's led me to write a number of books over the years, teaching. I actually taught this sort of work in the corporate world way back in the 80s. And here I am today, still sort of on this journey of exploration. And it's a personal exploration as well. It's like, how do I take this into my own life? How do I work with it in terms of my own awakening, you could say? And that's I suppose the underlying motivation for it all is how can I free myself from all the things that hold us up and limit us.
Now, your latest book, which is just coming out, is entitled Letting Go of Nothing, Relax Your Mind and Discover the Wonder of Your True Nature. And that has definitely got something to say in the context of our talk today, which is part of a series that I started in August 2020 entitled Freedom from Fear, which is basically just a free-form discussion taking the title as a starting point. And unlike most of the interviews that I approach, I'm not coming to this with any notes or talking points or anything like that whatsoever. So perhaps we could just kick off where a lot of these talks have started, which is just, contemplating the nature of fear, the origin of fear, the purpose of fear, because all the guests I've discussed this with, we've talked about the evolutionary purpose of fear in terms of like alerting us to danger. But how that has morphed into the sort of low-level anxiety that so many people live with throughout their lives. Fear has an evolutionary purpose, but what was the journey from that to where we find ourselves now, so to speak?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, clearly, as you say, it's very valuable for the organism. If there's some danger, if there's some threat, then fear is a useful response. And fear, the basic response to fear is to run away. That's, or maybe fight, but it's about activity. It wants activity, extreme activity as a result of fear. What we have today is we have this sort of innate biological programming, but it gets attached to a lot of other aspects of our lives. It becomes, we're worried about what other people might think of us, whether we're going to get the things we want to be happy, these sorts of things. And, even when we're sort of really, when we're desiring something, even behind that, there can be an anxiety that if we don't get it, we won't be happy or something. So it's, as you say, it's morphed into a place where it's actually there behind almost everything we do in one way or another. And I'm glad you used the word anxiety, because people use the word fear a lot. But strictly, fear is that biological response to danger. And I think anxiety is actually a more appropriate word. And I think behind all this is the desire to be happy. As many, spiritual teachers and other people have said, our fundamental motivation is to be at peace, to be happy, to be content. And fear is basically the concern that we may not be happy. And I think, just to go back a step there, I think being happy, whatever we're going to call, I call it happiness for the moment. We could call it contentment, peace of mind, inner stability, whatever we want to call it. But it's about feeling okay. The most generic way to put it is we want to feel okay. That's our fundamental motivation. And that is perfectly natural. And if things are okay in our world out there, if we're, well fed, we've got shelter, we're warm, whatever it is, if things are okay in the world out there, we feel okay inside. But if things aren't okay, if there's something, if we're cold or go out in the rain or something, we don't feel okay. We feel discontent, and then we do something to remedy the discontent. So we come inside, warm up, put a coat on, whatever it is. So the discontent is a motivation to return to contentment. I see that as our natural motivation, and that again is there for, biological reasons. And so I think that's a very natural, organic thing to want to return to contentment. Now, what happens, I think, with us is we get into imagining all these possible sources of discontent. And, whatever we imagine what could go wrong, or whether we're not going to get what we want. And so in the background, we sort of live in a state of, not all the time, but a lot of the time, there's a vague discontentment, which we're trying to rectify the whole time by doing something in the world. So we, I need to do this. You're feeling a bit depressed, go to the movies. Whatever it is, our whole world tells us, what to do if you're feeling discontent. So it's that background discontent which leads to the anxiety which we call fear. And I'm quite happy to call it fear, but I just like to point out it's not an animal fear we feel most of the time. We do from time to time, but it's that programming which gets triggered that there's something wrong, there's some threat, there's some danger, I'm not going to get my needs met. And so I think that's what's basically behind it. And we've created a world where, now with our creativity, our technology, our ingenuity, we can, create almost anything we want, can make the world any way we want it. Not perfectly, but we have that power. And so I think that has seduced us into the thinking that if I'm not happy, if I'm discontent, I've got to do something. So our whole world is seducing us into that. It's what I call the materialist mindset, that basically says, if you're not feeling okay, you need to do something in the world. And in a way, there's an irony here, because when we start imagining something that may go wrong in the future, or we start going over something that we didn't do right in the past, or something that happened to us in the past, when we start imagining these things that went wrong or could go wrong, we're creating discontent. And then we try to remedy the discontent by doing something. And I think it's almost like a sad joke here is the reason we're not feeling content is because we've created in our imagination some form of discontent. And then we go and try to remedy what we've created in the world rather than letting go of the discontent that's arisen. So if we let go of the discontent, we actually naturally come back to that state of contentment that we're looking for. So that's how I see how we got into this state where most of the time we're in this, what you might call discontent, anxiety, fear. It's there in the background most of the time. And we don't notice it. It actually feels so normal to be in this state, most of us. And then we'll have these moments of awakening where we let go. It's like, oh, wow, I just realized how tense I'd become over this. Because again, fear, because it wants action, creates tension in the body, which creates tension in the mind.
Now, here's an idea that you will be familiar with, but in some ways kind of cuts across or maybe goes against, in some way, the ideas and insights in your book. Maybe not, but you can shed some light on this. I've been challenged recently by individuals in interesting conversations, and also by the events, like many of us have, of the last 18 months. The idea that happiness and fulfillment is somehow why we're here. Because there is the idea that we choose to incarnate, whatever your cosmology or spiritual beliefs, we choose to incarnate in this place at this time, and that existence on Earth is basically part education and part battlefield, and that's what we're here to do. So just throwing that out there, that happiness and fulfillment, maybe that's not something that we should be seeking. Though I would draw a line between happiness and fulfillment, not equating them by any means. I think you can, you can be fulfilled doing something that isn't necessarily all about happiness.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure we come here with any purpose. I don't, that's not part of that's not part of my cosmology. But I think, as I think we are deep down behind everything we do, we are looking for, call it happiness. I think that's the fundamental motivation behind everything we do. But then I think where we go wrong is we start looking for that. We start trying to find happiness in what we do. And so we fall into this pattern I was talking about. We're using the world, or often abusing the world, for our personal happiness. And that's because in a way we've lost contact with that quality inside us. And so that's where we go wrong. We start seeking happiness in the world, and often at, the expense of nature or our own selves or our friends or whatever. So I don't feel there's anything wrong with that fundamental desire to be happy. Where we go wrong is how we seek to find it. And yes, I think we are, look at my own life, my purpose is to improve the quality of my life, to be to be more safe in my own being, to be kinder, to be loving to other people. And that I feel, is an honorable purpose. So I'm not quite sure what is the criticism of the people you're talking about? What is their actual criticism? I'm not quite sure of that.
I guess it's just simply another worldview, of what life is, and you'll be very familiar with traditions and views of life, the universe, and everything that do feel that that we do come here for a reason, a purpose. I'm open to that. The jury's still out, I would say, but it's then the feeling that is kind of like an assault course. That's what that life is in a way. and it tests us, whatever different experiences we go through, and that serves a purpose as well.
Yes. Again, I think the word purpose is where I slightly. I mean, as I said, I don't know whether we come here with a purpose or not. I don't take that as something to be too concerned about. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know. But maybe like you, the jury's still out. But I don't get too hung up about that. But as you say, life is like an assault course. Whether that's the purpose to be an assault course, again, I don't like to think about purpose. Life is an assault course because we're meeting challenges everywhere we go, and how we meet those challenges, how we respond to them is really, really important. And we can learn from that. We can definitely learn from that, and hopefully learn how to become better individuals as part of that.
Now, I'm going to quote a few words from the notes of one of my previous talks in this series, which basically expounds the idea that the unique intelligence which allows humans to sit atop Earth's evolutionary pyramid, whatever you think about however we've messed up, there are some senses when we appear to be the peak of evolution on Earth, and we have dominion over all life on the planet if we so choose. And in some ways, our greatest gifts, our self-reflection, self-consciousness, is the source of our most profound problems. So that which makes us most unique is that which makes us most accursed in a way.
Yes. I think there is something in that. As this gets into a whole other area of self-consciousness and ego. I mean, what we have is self-reflective consciousness, which is the fact that we are not only aware. I believe all creatures are aware. They're aware. They're experiencing the world. I mean, if I look at, any animal, my dog, it's clearly experiencing the world. But I don't think animals have semantic language like we do. They have their own ways of communicating. Definitely, they communicate. What we have is semantic language, which is the fact we can use words and combine words to create meaning. And that leads us to an internal process we call thinking, which is largely talking to ourselves in our head. We have conversations in our head about what's right, what's wrong, what to do, what's going on, all this stuff, what we're feeling. And then we become aware of this process. We become aware that we're thinking. We become aware that we're experiencing. So this is what's technically called self-reflective awareness. Our consciousness becomes aware that we are conscious. And then we start thinking, okay, so there's some self here that is conscious. And that's where things get a little tricky. If I look inside myself, I don't find a self that is aware in the sense I find lots of thoughts, lots of feelings, that sort of thing, and experiences, what's happening. And then I find a lot of maybe self-centered thoughts, which is about what do I want, what do I need? And that's what we often call the ego, that sense of self. We call it the ego. But I see that it isn't really a thing. It's a mode of thinking we get caught up in. And I think this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, the need to maintain our homeostasis, to check things are okay, to avoid danger. And so what we call egoic thinking, I think behind almost all egoic thinking is this fundamental thing we're talking about, the fear, the anxiety, the discontent, the imagination of what might happen or what might not happen. So there is that sense of self, but it's not actually a thing. It's more, as I say, it's a way of thinking that we get caught in. And I think we get caught in it most of the time. So, and that's where our problems come from. It's not so much because we are self-aware, it's because we mistakenly think we are this egoic mind. We think we are the thinking mind. We think I am this person thinking these thoughts, etc. So we create this sense of self, and then this sense of self begins to run our lives and create a lot of unnecessary problems and a lot of disruption to ourselves, the world, and our community. So it is a two-edged thing, this self-reflective consciousness. It leads to so many gifts that we have as human beings, so many gifts, our imagination, our creativity, our ability to weigh up right and wrong, all these things. And it gets caught up. It's caught up in what I call this egoic, fearful mode thinking, which, creates so much trouble.
We have a tremendous negativity bias as a species. It seems obvious. And there's lots of stories, narratives going back so far in the past that we don't really truly know about their origins, whether it's Garden of Eden, Atlantis, tales of lost golden ages, antediluvian civilizations, and the feeling that we've lost something, that's a persistent undercurrent. And I do wonder, if there's something about our consciousness that may have become corrupted for some reason or in some way that's made us the way that we are now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who knows what is, myth, what has some basis in historical fact. None of us know. We do know there were earlier civilizations and things. But I think this loss is something which occurs with us all every day. I think we fall from grace all the time. We fall from grace. It isn't something that happened in the past. I think it's continually happening to us when we get caught up in, the ego mind's thinking, or we get caught up in all this. Then we're functioning from a very limited consciousness. We get judgmental. We lose our connection with ourselves. We lose our connection with what I call our innate lovingness. We lose our connection with the present moment because we get caught up in thinking about the past or the future. So I see the fall wasn't something that happened, thousands of years ago or whatever. I think the fall is something that happens to each of us continually through the day. We keep falling from grace. We keep falling out of the beingness of the present moment into this worry and concern. And yes, that's the way I see it. It's something it's an ongoing process that we're all caught in. Yes, we have fallen, but we have the ability to reconnect with our essential nature as well at any time we choose to.
You mentioned your dog earlier, and we have ideas of like our pets and just other creatures on Earth, and their how they compare to us in terms of consciousness. And clearly, there's consciousness in everything, in all things, as it seems to me. But you think about when we talked earlier on about the evolutionary purpose of fear, and perhaps there might be an occasion when your dog is afraid. For very good reason, loud noise, another dog, whatever it happens to be. But you don't have a picture of your dog or cat or anything else, your budgie, contemplating the past and the future and ruminating on doom and gloom themes. I mean, so for many human beings, psychologically we exist in those places. The past, what happened, what didn't happen, the future, what might happen, what might not happen, at the expense, of the here and now, which is really, all there is. And I know that's a common theme in your work over the years.
Yes. I mean, if I watch, the dog, if it's done something wrong, it sort of knows it. It'll come back. It'll be a little fear that I might, reprimand it or something. But then it's all over and, 5 seconds later it's fine, or any anxiety or, see some danger, it, runs away from another dog. But then it's over quickly, whereas we human beings, I think it comes back to our fact that we can think in words and ruminate upon things, we can keep that going. Our fear, our anxiety, our judgments of other people, we can keep it going for not just hours, but days or weeks. We can say, oh God, I'm still upset about what happened 6 months ago. It's like, what? Why? What's the point in being upset about something that happened a long time ago? Or worrying about what might happen in the future. I think it was Mark Twain who said something like, he said, I'm an old man now, and my life has been full of disasters, most of which never happened. And I think that we get caught up in creating all this discontent, which other animals don't do. So in a way, that's how our consciousness has got somewhat messed up.
Yeah, because I'd say unlike other creatures, we have a sense of the past and the future, and also of our own mortality. I think that's very important in all of this. Yes. I suspect other creatures don't. And when we say other creatures here, I'd just like to point out, there's creatures like the dolphins and whales and even elephants to some extent who do seem to show some of, the same concerns that we have. I mean, they all mourn their dead.
That concludes part 1 of our interview. Part 2 will be available soon in the subscribers area at legalizefreedom.com.
legalizefreedom.com